She was just a civilian, quiet, polite, with a strange tattoo on her forearm that they mocked behind her back. "Wrong base, sweetheart," the instructors joked during the security drill. Then General Calloway walked by and stopped cold. His face drained of color as he stared at her ink. Minutes later, he returned holding a declassified photograph from an operation no one was supposed to know about. The woman in the image had the same eyes, same tattoo, and the file said one word: KIA. How could someone be standing right here when military records declared them dead 15 years ago? From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story and want to see what happens next to this mysterious woman with the classified past, consider subscribing to our channel. Elowyn Thorne arrived at the high-security military facility 15 minutes before her shift began, as she did every day. The underground command center hummed with pre-drill activity as soldiers and officers prepared for the routine security exercise. She moved quietly to her workstation, methodically arranging her equipment while keeping her eyes down, trying to remain invisible as usual. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everyone in the same unflattering glow. Elowyn adjusted her long-sleeve blouse, ensuring it covered her forearms completely. Her movements were efficient but unremarkable, designed not to draw attention. After 14 months at this facility, she had mastered the art of occupying space without being noticed. "Morning," she said softly to Lieutenant Rafferty Blackwood, who barely acknowledged her with a curt nod before returning to his conversation with Major Danton. Elowyn didn't mind. Being overlooked had become comfortable, expected. As she reached across her desk for her security badge, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the edge of a strange geometric tattoo on her forearm. Blackwood noticed immediately, his eyes narrowing with interest. "Nice ink," he said, his tone carrying an undercurrent of mockery. "Tribal? Or some kind of hippie crystal thing?" "Just something from a long time ago," Elowyn replied, quickly tugging her sleeve down. Blackwood smirked and turned to Major Danton. "Civilians," he muttered, just loud enough for Elowyn to hear. "They always try so hard to look interesting." Elowyn absorbed the comment without reaction, but something flashed in her ice-blue eyes for the briefest moment. A spark of something that contradicted her meek demeanor, then vanished so quickly it might never have been there at all. The command center filled as the security drill approached. Colonel Marsh entered, bringing with him an air of authority that straightened spines and quieted conversations. He began the morning briefing, outlining the parameters of the day's exercise. A simulated communications breach with multiple failure points designed to test response protocols. Elowyn kept to herself, efficiently preparing communications protocols at her terminal. During the briefing, she stood at the back, notebook in hand, while military personnel occupied the chairs around the table. No one offered her a seat. When questions were asked, her hand remained down, though she noted 3 critical flaws in the response plan that no one else seemed to catch. When the drill commenced, Elowyn performed her duties with quiet precision. The simulation involved a communications breach, and as tension in the room escalated, she found herself instinctively using military shorthand and positioning herself with a situational awareness that seemed out of place for a civilian contractor. "Sierra Channel compromised," she murmured to herself, fingers flying across her keyboard to establish a secondary communication line, rerouting through Tango 3. Major Prescott, a seasoned communications officer, gave her a puzzled look when she rapidly diagnosed a network vulnerability using terminology typically reserved for field operatives. "Where did you learn that nomenclature, Ms. Thorne?" Elowyn caught his gaze and quickly averted her eyes, busying herself with her terminal. "I must have picked it up around here," she said vaguely. "You know how it is." Prescott stared at her a moment longer, then shrugged and moved on. Elowyn released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. These moments of disconnect, where knowledge she shouldn't possess surfaced unexpectedly, had been happening more frequently lately. It was unsettling, like reading lines from a script she didn't remember studying. At lunch, she sat alone at the edge of the mess hall. Through the window, she could see the mountain range that surrounded the facility, jagged peaks against a clear blue sky that triggered a strange sense of familiarity she couldn't place. Something about high altitude, thin air, the way light reflected off snow at dawn. She blinked and the sensation was gone. "Ms. Thorne," came a voice, startling her from her thoughts. Captain Wexler stood before her, his posture rigid with displeasure. Your security clearance doesn't cover access to the Eastern Corridor. You were seen there yesterday. I was delivering updated protocols to Lieutenant Blackwood as requested, she replied evenly, her voice quiet but not apologetic. Next time, have someone escort you, Wexler said. Civilian contractors don't wander freely in restricted areas. Elowen nodded, accepting the reprimand without protest. As Wexler walked away, she heard him mutter to a colleague, "These contractors think they own the place." She finished her lunch in silence, ignoring the subtle stares from nearby tables. Being the only female civilian contractor in a predominantly male military environment meant constantly navigating boundaries, both spoken and unspoken. Elowen had grown accustomed to it, though sometimes she felt a strange dissonance, as if this careful negotiation of space was both familiar and foreign at the same time. Later that afternoon, the real drill began. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as a simulated breach scenario was announced. Red warning lights pulsed along the walls, and the main screens displayed cascading security failures across multiple systems. Officers took their emergency positions while Elowen remained at her station, her fingers flying over her keyboard with surprising dexterity. There was something about crisis situations that felt natural to her, a clarity that descended when others began to panic. "Civilians to the back," Lieutenant Blackwood called out, gesturing dismissively at Elowen. "The adults need to work now, sweetheart." Several junior officers laughed. Elowen gathered her materials without comment and moved to a terminal in the corner. From there, she observed the drill unfold, noting critical errors in the response pattern that no one else seemed to catch. The primary firewall had been breached in the simulation, but they were focusing their defense on the wrong secondary systems. When a communications failure occurred, trapping several teams between security checkpoints, the command staff struggled to establish a connection. "Try routing through the backup server," Major Danton suggested, his frustration evident. "Already compromised in the simulation," Prescott replied. "Sir," Elowen spoke up from her corner, "if you try the old Whiskey Niner protocol from the 2015 manual—" "Wrong base, sweetheart," Blackwood cut her off with a patronizing smile. "That's not how we do things here." More laughter rippled through the room as Elowen fell silent. She watched them try 3 more approaches, each failing, knowing her suggestion would have worked perfectly. The Whiskey Niner protocol was outdated, but would bypass the compromised channels entirely. How she knew this with such certainty, she couldn't explain. The drill commanders arrived to observe, among them General Harlan Calloway, a decorated veteran known for his stern demeanor and impeccable record. As he entered, the room straightened collectively, voices lowering to professional tones. "Status report," the general demanded, and Blackwood rushed to explain their progress, conveniently omitting the failed communications problem. "We've contained the primary breach, sir, and are working to re-establish contact with Teams 2 and 4, Blackwood said smoothly. General Calloway nodded, moving through the command center with a critical eye, stopping occasionally to ask pointed questions that left officers stammering. When he approached Elowen's corner, she kept her focus on her screen, hoping to avoid scrutiny. "And you are?" the general asked, standing directly before her terminal. "Elowen Thorne, sir," she replied, looking up. "Civilian communications specialist." "What's your assessment of the current situation, Ms. Thorne?" The direct question surprised her. Civilian contractors were rarely asked for their opinions, especially during high-level exercises. "They're approaching it backwards, sir," she said before she could stop herself. "The breach is a distraction. The real vulnerability is in the cross-channel authentication protocols." The general's eyebrows rose slightly. "Interesting observation. And how would you address it?" As Elowen reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear while formulating her response, her sleeve slid back, revealing that strange geometric tattoo, an intricate pattern of interlocking lines that resembled no known military insignia, yet carried a precise, almost mathematical quality. General Calloway's eyes fell on the tattoo mid-sentence. His face drained of color. He stopped speaking entirely, staring at Elowen with an expression of disbelief that silenced the entire room. For 3 excruciating seconds, their eyes locked, his filled with shock, hers with sudden, inexplicable apprehension. Something passed between them, a recognition that made no sense to Elowen, yet felt deeply significant. Then, without a word of explanation, the general turned and exited the room, leaving confusion in his wake. Elowen felt a cold sweat break across her forehead. Something deep within her mind stirred, like a door long sealed beginning to crack open. Fragments of images flashed, snow-capped mountains, a radio crackling with static, the weight of a weapon in her hands. "What was that about?" Blackwood asked, looking between Elowen and the door where the general had disappeared. "I have no idea," she whispered, but a voice in the back of her mind whispered, "He knows who you are." The drill continued around her, but Elowen barely noticed. She was suddenly aware of her heartbeat, steady and controlled despite her confusion. Her breathing remained even, her hands stable, her posture alert, physical responses at odds with the civilian persona she had inhabited for years. Something was wrong with her memories. Something was wrong with her. 20 minutes passed in tense uncertainty. The drill continued, but whispers circulated about General Calloway's strange behavior. Elowen noticed the sideways glances in her direction, but maintained her composure, though her hands trembled slightly as she typed. "What did you do to spook the general?" one of the junior officers asked her, half joking, half suspicious. "Nothing," Elowen replied, genuinely confused. Yet a nagging feeling persisted at the edge of her consciousness, like trying to recall a dream upon waking. She knew something momentous was about to happen. She knew with a certainty that defied explanation that her life was about to change irrevocably. And the strangest part was not the fear this knowledge should have brought, but the sense of relief, as if she had been waiting for this moment for 15 years without knowing it. The command center doors swung open with authority. General Calloway returned, his face now set in granite determination. Under his arm, he carried a worn leather portfolio, stamped "Classified" in faded red letters. "Attention!" someone called, and the room snapped to order. "The drill is suspended," General Calloway announced, his voice cutting through the room like steel. "Everyone out, now." The staff exchanged confused glances but began filing toward the exit. "Except you," the general added, pointing directly at Elowen. Lieutenant Blackwood hesitated by the door. "Sir, as security officer, I should remain for any sensitive discussions." "Out, Lieutenant," General Calloway said, without looking at him. "That's an order." Blackwood's jaw tightened, but he complied, closing the door behind him with slightly more force than necessary. When the last person had left, the general locked the door and turned to face Elowen. She remained seated at her terminal, her outward appearance calm despite the hammering of her heart. "How long have you been at this facility, Ms. Thorne?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. 14 months, sir," she answered promptly. "And before that, communication specialist at the Eastern Regional Center, 3 years. And before that," Elowen opened her mouth, then paused, her brow furrowed slightly. "University of Colorado, communications technology." She frowned, suddenly uncertain. Why had it taken her a moment to recall her own education? It was a simple question with a simple answer, yet retrieving the information felt like reaching through fog. The general nodded slowly, watching her face with intense scrutiny. He approached her workstation and placed the leather portfolio on the desk between them. "Your tattoo," he said. "When did you get it?" Elowen's hand moved unconsciously to her forearm. "College, sophomore year. A mistake after too many drinks with friends." "What does it mean?" "It's just a geometric design. I like the symmetry." The words felt rehearsed, even to her. General Calloway opened the portfolio and removed a photograph, placing it face down on the desk. "Ms. Thorne, have you ever heard of Operation Lazarus?" A sharp pain flashed behind Elowen's eyes. The name resonated somewhere deep in her mind, triggering a cascade of disjointed images: snow, mountains, radio static, blood on white ground. "No, sir," she managed to say, though the pain intensified with the denial. "How about the 5th Special Reconnaissance Division?" Another flash of pain, stronger this time. More images flickered in her mind, equipment checks in the dark, a team moving silently through rugged terrain, the weight of specialized gear, and a mission briefing in a windowless room. "No," she whispered, less certain. The general turned the photograph over. It showed an elite special operations team, 8 members in tactical gear, standing in a remote mountain location. Harsh peaks and glaciers stretched behind them. The date stamp read 15 years earlier. In the center of the photo stood a woman with Elowen's ice blue eyes and the identical geometric tattoo visible on her exposed forearm. Her hair was shorter, her posture that of a trained soldier, but the face, though younger and marked by confidence rather than quiet submission, was unmistakably Elowen's. Attached to the corner of the photo was a file tab with 3 bold red letters, KIA. Elowen stared at the image, her breath caught in her throat. The pain in her head intensified, becoming a roaring pressure that threatened to split her skull. "That is not me," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. The woman in the photograph wasn't just similar to her, it was her. "Operation Lazarus," General Calloway said quietly. "You were reported killed in action 15 years ago in the Karakoram Mountains. Captain Elowen Thorne, 5th Special Reconnaissance Division." Elowen's hands began to tremble. Her past, or what she believed was her past, began to crack like thin ice underfoot. Colorado University? She had memories of classes, professors, friends, her apartment in Denver, her parents visiting for graduation, all so vivid, so detailed. Yet as she focused on any specific memory, the edges blurred, details became contradictory or impossible to recall. "This is a mistake," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "That woman might look like me, but I've never been in the military. I certainly wasn't in any mountains 15 years ago." General Calloway's expression remained neutral, but his eyes were filled with a strange mix of concern and caution, as if he were approaching a dangerous animal. "The tattoo is identical," he pointed out, "down to the smallest detail, not similar, not inspired by, but exact." A moment of profound silence passed between them. "Sir?" Elowen finally responded, her voice transformed from its usual softness to something crisper, more defined. "I have no memory of this woman." "The tattoo?" he pressed. "A mistake from my college years," she repeated too quickly. The general studied her face, then reached into his pocket and removed a small device about the size of a playing card. He held it before her eyes and displayed a specific sequence of numbers, 7-2-9-0-3-Alpha-Echo. The effect was immediate and profound. Elowen's pupils dilated dramatically as if she had been drugged. Her posture shifted, spine straightening, shoulders squaring. When she blinked, something in her gaze had fundamentally changed, as though a veil had been lifted, revealing a sharper, more dangerous intelligence beneath. "Activation code accepted," she said, her voice now entirely different, deeper, authoritative. "Captain Thorne, 5th Special Recon, awaiting orders." General Calloway exhaled slowly. My God, they really did it. The Lazarus Protocol was actually implemented. Sir Elowen, or Captain Thorne, looked at him with confusion. 2 sets of memories were colliding in her mind. 15 years of civilian life against fragmented recollections of military training, covert operations, and a final mission in the mountains that ended in blinding light and silence. She pressed her fingers against her temples, trying to reconcile the contradictions. "I remember both. How is that possible?" "You were part of a classified program," the general explained, his voice low. "Deep cover operatives who could be placed in strategic positions and reactivated when needed. Your memories weren't erased, just suppressed, buried beneath a constructed identity." Elowen's mind raced, reassembling fragments of her true history. Selective memory suppression, cognitive partitioning. We were briefed on the theoretical applications, but they said it was years from implementation. "The program advanced faster than was officially reported," General Calloway said. "Lazarus was designed to create operatives who could be embedded deep in strategic locations, living completely normal lives until activation was required. The perfect sleeper agents with no awareness of their true purpose." Elowen pressed her hands against her temples. "The program was terminated. Ethical concerns. I remember the briefing." "It was supposedly shut down," General Calloway agreed. "Yet here you are." "Why?" she asked, looking up at him with eyes that now held the calculating assessment of a trained operative. "Why am I here?" "That's what concerns me," the general responded grimly. "Someone placed you here, someone who knows the activation protocols, and you're not the only one. 3 other presumed dead operatives have been discovered at other facilities across the country." "Someone's gathering the ghosts," Elowin murmured, the phrase emerging from her fractured memory. "And we need to find out why," the general added, "before they're activated for their true purpose." Elowin stood, her movement suddenly fluid and precise. She looked down at her hands that had typed routine communications reports for years, but that now she remembered had once assembled specialized weapons blindfolded, had once signaled teams across valleys with precision, had once ended lives when missions required it. "How much do you remember?" the general asked. "It's coming back in pieces," Elowin replied, closing her eyes to focus. "The 5th Division, high-altitude operations, specialized communications and infiltration. Then a mission in the Karakoram range. We were tracking someone important. Then an explosion, I think. After that, nothing until Colorado." "Colorado was your cover," General Calloway explained. "An elaborate backstory supported by digital records and even actors hired to portray classmates and professors. If you ever tried to reconnect with your past, the program was thorough. My parents? Part of the constructed identity." Elowin absorbed this information with remarkable composure, the trained operative in her processing the revelation clinically. But beneath that professional exterior, the civilian identity she had inhabited for 15 years reeled with the implications. Her entire life, her memories, her relationships, her sense of self had been fabricated. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice hardening. "Who decided to resurrect Lazarus?" "That's what we need to find out." General Calloway unlocked his tablet and displayed a map of military installations across the country. "The other identified sleepers are at these locations, all strategic facilities, all with access to critical systems or information." "Jameson," Elowin said suddenly, the name surfacing from her returning memories. "Colonel Marcus Jameson. He was project lead for Lazarus. Jameson died 3 years ago. Heart attack." "Convenient," Elowin remarked. "Who took over his projects?" "That information is compartmentalized. I'm still working through channels to access it." Elowin studied the map, her mind now working with military precision. The placements aren't random, all communications hubs, all with access to the Stratcom network. She looked up at the general. "Someone's building a back door into our strategic communications system." General Calloway nodded gravely. "That's my assessment as well. The question is, why activate you now? What's the timeline?" Elowin closed her eyes, searching her fragmented memories. Lazarus had fail-safes. If the primary handler didn't check in regularly, secondary protocols would initiate automatically. Perhaps Jameson's death triggered something. "Or someone else is pulling the strings," the general added. "There's another possibility," Elowin said slowly. "What if I wasn't supposed to be activated yet? What if seeing you, recognizing the uniform, or something else triggered a premature awakening?" General Calloway considered this. "If that's true, then whoever placed you here doesn't know you've been compromised." "Which gives us an advantage," Elowin concluded. "I can continue to play the role of civilian specialist while we investigate." "Dangerous," the general warned. "If there are other triggers embedded in your programming." "It's a risk we have to take," Elowin interrupted. "If someone is trying to compromise our military communications network, we need to know who and why." The general studied her face, searching for any sign of uncertainty or deception. Finding none, he nodded once. "Very well, Captain. We proceed with caution." Elowin looked down at the photograph again, at the woman she had been, the woman she was beginning to remember being, the confident posture, the alert eyes, the sense of purpose. "One thing I don't understand," she said quietly. "Why me? Why any of us? Why not just recruit new operatives?" "Because you were ghosts," General Calloway replied. "Officially dead, off the books, perfect for operations that could never be traced back to any official channel." "And now someone has brought us back," Elowin murmured. "The question is, for what purpose?" The general's reply was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. "Sir," came Lieutenant Blackwood's voice, There's an urgent communication from CENTCOM. Elowen and the general exchanged a glance. With a slight nod, Elowen shifted her posture, slipping back into her civilian persona with practiced ease. "We'll continue this discussion later," General Calloway said, loudly enough to be heard through the door. Then, more quietly, "Trust no one, Captain, especially yourself." As the general moved to unlock the door, Elowen returned to her terminal, outwardly the same unassuming civilian contractor as before. But inside, everything had changed. 15 years of constructed identity warred with her true past, and somewhere in the balance lay the key to understanding who had placed her here, and what they intended her to do. The following morning, Elowen returned to the command center. Outwardly, she appeared the same as always, quiet, efficient, unassuming. But anyone looking closely might have noticed subtle differences. The way she entered the room with precise awareness of every exit point, how her eyes cataloged each person present, the slight adjustment in her posture that spoke of coiled readiness rather than civilian deference. Inside her mind, two identities struggled for dominance: Elowen Thorne. The civilian communications specialist existed alongside Captain Thorne, the special reconnaissance operative. 15 years of constructed memories competed with fragmented recollections of military training and classified missions. She had spent the night in her small apartment, sitting in the dark, examining photographs of a life she now knew had never existed, touching possessions that had been carefully selected to reinforce her cover identity. In the bathroom mirror that morning, she had studied her own face, searching for the soldier beneath the civilian mask. She found her in the set of her jaw, the watchful quality of her eyes, the economy of movement that years of pretending to be ordinary hadn't quite erased. "Morning, sweetheart," Lieutenant Blackwood said, as he approached her station with his usual condescending smile. "Coffee run? I take mine black." Elowen looked up at him, momentarily tempted to demonstrate exactly how quickly Captain Thorne could incapacitate a man his size. Instead, she smiled placidly. "I think the mess hall is still serving." Before Blackwood could respond, the command center doors opened. General Calloway entered, followed by two senior officers Elowen had never seen before. The room fell silent as the general made his way directly to her workstation. Without preamble, General Calloway came to attention and rendered a formal salute. "Captain Thorne," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "your security clearance has been reinstated. These are your new orders." He handed her a folder with the highest security classification visible on its cover. The stunned silence that followed was almost palpable. Lieutenant Blackwood's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. "Lieutenant Blackwood," the general continued, "you'll be reporting directly to Captain Thorne for the duration of this operation." "Sir," Blackwood managed to stammer, his face flushing red. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand, Lieutenant. You need to follow orders." The general turned back to Elowen. "Captain, the briefing room is yours when you're ready." Elowen accepted the folder with a crisp nod. "Thank you, sir." As General Calloway left, whispers erupted around the room. Personnel stared openly at Elowen, their expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief to suspicion. Major Prescott approached her cautiously. "Captain Thorne?" he asked, emphasizing her rank as if testing how it sounded. "I don't recall seeing your commission in the personnel files." "That's correct, Major," Elowen replied, gathering the folder in her tablet. "You wouldn't have—" She stood, surveying the confused faces of the people who had dismissed her for months. With deliberate slowness, she rolled up her sleeve to reveal the geometric tattoo in its entirety. The intricate pattern seemed to catch the light differently now, its precise angles and intersections suddenly meaningful rather than merely decorative. "We have a situation," she addressed the room with newfound authority, "and I'm afraid I'm part of it." She moved to the main display console and entered a command code that even the senior officers present didn't have clearance to use. The system accepted it without hesitation, displaying a map of military installations across the country. 4 locations were highlighted in red. "This isn't just ink," she continued, indicating her tattoo. "It's a marker, a signal. And there are others like me out there, sleeper agents who don't know what they are until they're activated." She brought up personnel files on the screen, 3 faces, all bearing the same vacant expression she had worn for 15 years. Specialist Darren Mercer, Communications Center Alpha, Senior Technician Lowell Reed, Western Defense Network, Analyst Sienna Vega, Stratcom Integration. Elowen pointed to each image in turn. All three have been working at these facilities for between 2 and 5 years. All three are, according to classified records, deceased former operatives. Lieutenant Blackwood, still struggling to process the reversal, found his voice. Why should we trust you if you're some kind of sleeper agent? Because I'm awake now, Lieutenant. Elowen cut him off. And I know how they think, because I am them. She turned to the assembled staff, her ice blue eyes sharp with purpose. We have 72 hours before the synchronization protocol completes. When that happens, every sleeper agent will receive their final directive simultaneously. What will that directive be? Major Prescott asked. Elowen's expression darkened. Given our positioning at critical infrastructure points, nothing good. We were trained for worst-case scenarios: communications disruption, false orders insertion, strategic systems compromise. You're saying you could take down our entire communications network? Colonel Marsh asked, his voice tense. Not me alone, Elowen clarified, but 4 of us, positioned at key junction points? Yes, and we wouldn't even know we were doing it. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These weren't external threats they could guard against with firewalls and security protocols. These were trusted personnel, embedded deep within their systems, with full access and years of demonstrated loyalty. I need a team, Elowen continued, small, discreet, and ready to move immediately. We need to locate and secure the other operatives before they receive their activation codes. Colonel Marsh nodded. I'll authorize whatever resources you need, Captain. Elowen glanced at Lieutenant Blackwood, who stood rigidly to the side, his earlier condescension replaced by wary confusion. Lieutenant, I'll need your security expertise. You know the personnel and protocols at the other facilities. Blackwood hesitated, then straightened. Yes, Captain. Later, in the secure briefing room, General Calloway studied the data Elowen had compiled overnight. Locations of suspected sleeper agents, patterns in their placement, fragments of code hidden in routine communications. How much of your memory has returned? He asked. Enough to be useful, not enough to know who's behind this. Elowen rubbed her temples, fighting a headache. The civilian identity is still there too. 15 years of memories, feelings, experiences, all constructed, but still real to me. Which one is the real you? Elowen looked up, her expression complex. I don't know yet. Maybe neither, maybe both. She straightened, focusing on the mission. But I know what I need to be right now. The general nodded, understanding. Find them before they find us. And before whoever placed us here activates the final protocol. Elowen studied the map, her finger tracing connections between the facilities. They didn't just want sleepers in place. They wanted specific people with specific skills. The question is why. Your team is assembled, General Calloway said. Transport to the Western Defense Network is standing by. Specialist Reed is your priority target. Reed was our communications expert, Elowen said, memories continuing to surface. If anyone could build a backdoor into the entire system, it would be him. As they prepared to depart for the first suspected sleeper location, Lieutenant Blackwood appeared at the doorway, his earlier arrogance replaced by awkward uncertainty. He had changed into tactical gear, properly equipped for the mission ahead. Captain, he said stiffly, your transport is ready. Elowen nodded, gathering her equipment. As she passed him, she paused. For what it's worth, Lieutenant, I didn't know either. I was as blind as you were. That tattoo, he said quietly. Everyone laughed about it. Not everyone, Elowen replied, thinking of the general's recognition. Sometimes, Lieutenant, the things people mock are the very things they should fear the most. As she walked toward the waiting helicopter, Elowen felt the weight of both her identities and the mission that would determine which would ultimately prevail. Behind her, the facility that had been the site of her humiliation now became the base for her redemption. The helicopter blades were already spinning as she approached the landing pad. 4 team members waited inside: Lieutenant Blackwood, 2 security specialists, and a medical officer trained in cognitive science. A perfect small team composition for the delicate task of extracting a potentially dangerous sleeper agent, without triggering fail-safe protocols. Once airborne, Alowan reviewed the file on Lowell Reed. According to his cover identity, he was a 38-year-old communications specialist who had been with the Western Defense Network for 4 years. Divorced, no children, kept to himself. By all accounts, an exemplary employee with high security clearance. But according to the classified file General Calloway had uncovered, Technical Sergeant Lowell Reed had died in a training accident 12 years earlier. Like Alowan, he had been part of a specialized unit, in his case, electronic warfare and signals intelligence. His particular expertise had been in creating undetectable backdoors in supposedly secure systems. Our approach needs to be careful, Alowan explained to her team. If he's triggered by seeing me or hearing specific phrases, we could activate his programming prematurely. How do you plan to handle him? Blackwood asked. I'll go in alone as a visiting systems auditor. Get close enough to administer the cognitive inhibitor. She held up a small device disguised as a standard military ID scanner. Once he's sedated, we extract him for secure containment and deactivation. And if that doesn't work? One of the security specialists asked. Alowan met his eyes steadily. Then we moved to Protocol 3. The implication was clear. If they couldn't safely contain Reed, they would have to eliminate the threat he posed. The Western Defense Network facility appeared on the horizon, a sprawling complex of low buildings surrounded by multiple security perimeters. As they approached, Alowan felt a strange sense of anticipation. Was Reed aware of his true identity? Had he already been activated? Or was he still living in blissful ignorance, believing himself to be nothing more than what his cover identity suggested? 4 hours later, they were airborne again, with Reed secured in a medically induced coma in the rear of the aircraft. The extraction had gone smoothly, almost too smoothly. Reed had recognized Alowan instantly, not as a fellow operative, but as someone he believed he had met at a training conference 3 years earlier, a false memory they both shared as part of their cover identities. 1 down, 2 to go, Blackwood said as they headed toward their next target. It's not adding up, Alowan replied, studying the data they'd retrieved from Reed's personal devices. No signs of activation, no suspicious communications. Isn't that good news? It's concerning, she corrected. If he hasn't been activated, why was I, and by whom? The answer came sooner than expected. As they approached the Stratcom facility where Sienna Vega was stationed, an urgent communication came through from General Calloway. Captain, we've identified a 4th sleeper, Specialist Bryce Harrington at NORAD. He's just been reported missing from his post. Alowan felt a chill run through her. Harrington? Are you certain? Positive identification. Why? Because Harrington wasn't part of our program. He was our handler. Alowan's mind raced with implications. If he's in play, this goes deeper than we thought. Redirect to NORAD immediately, the general ordered. Find Harrington. As the helicopter changed course, Alowan briefed her team. Harrington was Lazarus Control. He knew all the codes, all the sleepers, all the protocols. What would he want with access to NORAD? Blackwood asked. Alowan's expression was grim. Early warning systems, strategic response protocols, the ability to blind our defenses or trigger false alerts. You think this is preparation for an attack? I think someone very powerful has resurrected a program that should have stayed buried, and they're using ghosts like me to do their dirty work. When they landed at NORAD, they were met by a security team already on high alert. Harrington had been missing for 6 hours, last seen entering a secure server room with his regular access credentials. Captain Thorne? A colonel approached her as she disembarked. General Calloway briefed us on your situation. Frankly, it's hard to believe. Alowan rolled up her sleeve, revealing her tattoo. Believe it, Colonel, and understand that right now, your facility is compromised by someone who knows exactly how to hurt us. They moved quickly through the facility, following Harrington's digital trail through the security systems. He had accessed multiple classified servers, downloaded terabytes of data, and then simply walked out, his security credentials still valid despite protocols that should have flagged such unusual activity. In the main control center, Alowan worked with the technical team to trace what had been taken. The pattern became clear. Strategic response protocols, command chain verification processes, authentication codes. He's building a skeleton key, she realized aloud. With this information, he could issue false orders that would appear legitimate at every verification checkpoint. To what end? The colonel asked. Before Elowen could answer, a technician called out, "Sir, we're detecting anomalies in the early warning system. Multiple ghost returns appearing and disappearing." "It's starting," Elowen said. "He's testing the system, seeing if his access still works." She moved to a communications terminal and began typing rapidly, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced precision. "I'm implementing a containment protocol. It won't stop him completely, but it will slow him down." As she worked, Lieutenant Blackwood approached. "Captain, there's something you should see." He handed her a tablet displaying a message that had just been decoded from a secure channel. The message was simple. "The ghosts are awake. Lazarus walks." Elowen stared at the words, understanding flowing through her like ice water. "It's not just about the systems, it's about us, the sleepers. We're the real weapon." "What do you mean?" She looked up, her eyes clear with terrible purpose. "We were never meant to be reactivated as ourselves. The final protocol isn't just sending us instructions, it's overwriting us completely, turning us into something else." "Like what?" "Like perfect infiltrators with direct access to our most sensitive installations." She stood abruptly. "We need to lock down all facilities where sleepers have been identified. Now." As orders went out across the country's military network, Elowen turned to her team. "I need to go to Stratcom personally. Sienna Vega was our infiltration specialist. If anyone can get to her before she's activated, it's me." "I'm coming with you," Lieutenant Blackwood said, no trace of his former condescension remaining. Elowen nodded, recognizing the shift in their dynamic. "We leave in 10 minutes. As they prepared to depart, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a darkened monitor screen. For a moment, she saw both versions of herself superimposed: the quiet, deferential civilian and the confident, capable soldier. Two identities crafted for different purposes, neither entirely false, neither completely true. "Who are you really?" Blackwood asked quietly, noticing her moment of introspection. Elowen turned to him, her expression resolute. "I'm the ghost they should have left buried, and I'm the one who's going to stop them." She strode toward the waiting transport, no longer concerned with appearing ordinary or unremarkable. The time for hiding was over. Somewhere out there, Harrington was executing a plan 15 years in the making, and only Elowen, who understood both the program and the people in it, had a chance of stopping it. The stakes couldn't be higher, the clock was ticking, and Captain Elowen Thorne was finally, truly awake.